So, our president of the United States, unfortunately, is a yam or a squash or some other sort of vegetable because he is no longer sentient. I say this after long consideration and after reading a very long interview that he did with Time magazine. Now, he's on the cover of Time, which is basically a defunct magazine at this point. He's on the cover, gazing out stonily on the cover, black and white, with the headline, "If He Wins," sort of standing over the Resolute desk, staring into camera. And Time magazine is doing its best to try and massage him through this campaign. They say, quote, "In the time we spent with the president, he remembered long ago encounters with historic figures ranging from Pope John Paul II to Henry Kissinger. He recalled the words of historian John Meacham, who told Biden after the president entered the Oval Office on Inauguration Day that the country had not been as divided since the days of Lincoln, nor the future of its democracy as challenged since those of FDR. The overall impression Biden left us with is one of a man in conversation with history, both the country's and his own." Well, actually, when you read the interview, what you come away with is a president who's in conversation with the walls, perhaps with his gruel. And that's not just because he's got all the wrong principle. It's not just because he has effectively set America's foreign policy on fire while also lighting the jet fuel under the inflationary economy that Americans have been suffering through. No, it's also because when you read the interview, and again, it's a transcript of an interview, Time did not release the tape. He is verbally what he is physically when he attempts to climb up a flight of stairs into Air Force One. This matters because the rest of the world can see it. So I'm going to go through in detail some of the things that he says in this Time magazine interview, because we have been told by all of his allies that he is sharp as a tack, that he is razor sharp, that this man, he's the most with it president we've ever had, that in meetings, he is just quizzing people fast, asking them about events, asking them about times and places, that he is so with it, according to his aides, that they cannot keep up with this geriatric dotard. Well, that's not the impression you get from this interview. So he goes through a bunch of different topics in this extraordinarily long interview, and he falls apart in nearly every answer. The interview begins with him discussing American foreign policy. He says, and again, this is a direct quotation, we are the world power. And what I inherited as a consequence of the mistake that we made in Afghanistan was not a loss in Afghanistan, excuse my cold. I've always believed there are two elements to American security, and the biggest element and our normative example is our alliances. Our alliances. We have, compared to the rest of the world, we have put together the strongest alliance in the history of the world, number one. Number two, we're in a situation where we're able to move in a way that recognizes how much the world has changed and still lead the world, and it's our security. For example, the idea that when Putin decided to go into Russia, he's going to go from Russia into Ukraine. The reason why I cleared the intelligence so we can release the information we knew that he was going to attack was to let the world know we were still in charge. Now, if you can follow that as an answer, you win $100, because that is absolutely nonsensical. In the course of one paragraph, he falls all over himself. He suggests that we did not lose in Afghanistan. He suggests we have the strongest alliance in the history of the world. The history of the world, not like World War II. The alliance to take on Russia in Ukraine. And he says, in the middle of this, that Putin decided to go into Russia. Then he pats himself on the back for his activity in Ukraine. Quote, I did it. And we're now the strongest nation. We have the strongest alliance in all of America, all of history. The strongest alliance in all of America, guys. More than all the other alliances in America. Again, these are just direct quotations. In the meantime, what we keep skipping over is what the consequence of the success of Russia in Ukraine would be. That's why I brought this along. You probably haven't read it. Most people haven't read it. He says this is part of reestablishing the Soviet Union. That's what this is all about. It wasn't just about taking part of. He wanted to go back to the days when there was NATO, and there was that other outfit that Poland, everybody belonged to. There was that other outfit that Poland, everybody belonged to? Is it like a hockey team, or does he mean the Warsaw Pact? Again, like the fact that the president of the United States is old enough to actually remember in detail the Warsaw Pact, but cannot remember what it is called, is not a good sign for his mentality going into an election where, if elected, he will finish office being 86 years old. He says peace looks like making sure Russia never, 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 never occupies Ukraine. That's what peace looks like. And it doesn't mean NATO. They're part of NATO. It means we have a relationship with them like we do with other countries, but where we supply weapons, they can defend themselves in the future. But it is not, if you notice, I was the one when, and you guys did report it at time, the one that I was saying that I am not prepared to support the NATOization of Ukraine. Again, he's not even speaking English. He's not even speaking English. So forget about the bad policy. Forget about the fact that he slow-walked aid to Ukraine, that only in the last week or so has he decided that, hey, maybe if we are going to ally ourselves with Ukraine, sufficient to push the Russians back to lead to some sort of negotiation, perhaps we might want to supply them the weaponry to hit bases in Russia that are being used to target Ukraine. That's been happening in the last 2 weeks, after 2 years of war. It's not just that he's wrong about everything. Again, he is no longer with us. There's more on this in just a moment. First, the cost of living is up almost 20% from 2021. Families everywhere are feeling it. If you're looking at your bills, wondering how in the world you can save on some monthly expenses, why don't you start with your phone bill? I'm happy to announce that Pure Talk is now providing international roaming to over 50 countries. Once again, Pure Talk is investing in their customers with their own money without charging you an extra penny. As you plan summer travel, make sure your wireless provider has you covered at home and abroad. Pure Talk already puts you on America's most dependable 5G network. Now they're offering coverage in over 50 other countries as well. Enjoy the freedom of unlimited talk, text, and ample 5G data for just $20 a month with Pure Talk. It's a deal that's hard to beat, costing you less than half of what you'd pay with other networks. Not only is their U.S. customer service team ready to assist you with a seamless switch, they also have fantastic savings on the latest iPhones and Androids. If you're ready to make a smart switch, why not try my cell phone company, Pure Talk, and start saving today? Visit puretalk.com/Shapiro. Explore their offers. When you make the switch, you'll enjoy an additional 50% off your very first month of coverage. Don't miss out on the opportunity to save on wireless at home and abroad. Visit puretalk.com/Shapiro. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro today. Then he gets to Israel. And in Israel, he's totally discombobulated. Discombobulated because the moral math here is extremely clear. And Joe Biden is having a real tough time with this one. He's having a real tough time with just supplying Israel with what it needs to finish off, or even allowing Israel to finish off in the south so that they can turn north and push back. Of course, has upped its game over the course of the last few months. They set a lot of northern Israel on fire over the course of the last 72 hours. Israel was able to put out those fires, but things are quickly escalating in the north of Israel as well. Israel's also under attack from the Houthis in Yemen. They're under attack from bases in Iraq, in Syria. They're under direct attack from Iran. They're under attack on 7 different fronts minimum. And so, of course, Joe Biden is wildly confused. He believes that the real threat is, of course, wait for it, the Israeli government. So the Time magazine interviewer says, so in Israel, obviously, a difficult time there. What steps are you prepared to take against Israel now that Netanyahu appears to have crossed your red line in Rafah, Mr. President? Now, the reality is that Israel did not cross Biden's supposed red line in Rafah. And let's be straight about this. Crossing red lines of Joe Biden's basically has no consequence. You'll recall that Joe Biden said that there was a red line in Iran attacking Israel. Then Iran did it, and not much happened. You'll recall that Barack Obama once said there was a red line in Syria, and then Syria used chemical weapons. He did nothing. It turns out crossing Democratic red lines basically has no consequences. So Biden says this, and again, it is not merely that he is wrong. It is that his brains are scrambled eggs. Quote, I'm not going to speak to that now because you're going to report this before I'm in the process of talking with the Israelis right now, so I'm not going to. If I tell you, you'll write it. It's not the time for you to write it. I have not spoken with Bibi since the attack on Sunday. Was it Sunday? I'm not going to respond to that because I'm about to make a anyway. The sentence finishes with the word anyway. Now, you might think to yourself, that's not a complete sentence. You would be right. But don't worry, there's more. Quote, this is the interviewer. Whose fault is it that the deal, the ceasefire for hostages, has not been consummated? Is it or Israel or both? And Biden correctly says, could end this tomorrow. Could say, unintelligible. That's the editor putting that in there. And done, period. And the last offer Israel made was very generous in terms of who they'd be willing to release, what they'd give in return, etc. Bibi is under enormous pressure on the hostages, and so he's prepared to do about anything to get the hostages back. When I went over immediately after the brutal attack, I said then, and it became public, I said, don't make the same mistake we did going after bin Laden. Don't try. The idea of occupying Afghanistan, the idea you had nuclear arsenals in Iran that were being, in Iraq, that were being generated, simply not true. So he's already, in this sentence, mixed up Iraq and Iran. He says it led to endless wars. They were not true. Don't make the mistakes we made. And they're making that mistake, I think. Excuse my voice. I apologize. Is any of this quieting? Does any of this feel really solid? Like the rest of the world's going to be really scared of this guy? I will also point out here that Joe Biden warning the Israelis not to take on in the same way the United States took on Osama bin Laden. Oh, you mean when Osama bin Laden killed 3,000 American citizens, so he took down 2 countries, full countries, and occupied them for 20 years like that? I will also note, Afghanistan is all the way across the world, super far away from the United States. Gaza is literally on the border of Israel. They literally just walked across a border. Walked across it. Okay, then Biden went ahead and undermined Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, some more. So according to the interviewer says, some in Israel have suggested that Netanyahu is prolonging the war for his own political self-preservation. Do you believe that? Now, the real answer here is, of course not. The only person who's prolonging the war for political self-preservation is Joe Biden. If the Israelis had their way, they would have gone into Rafah in February and March. Instead, they've been sitting around and slowly bleeding themselves into Rafah at the expense of their own soldiers, giving their enemies plenty of time to plant IEDs in closets and such. But Biden says, I'm not going to comment on that. There's every reason for people to draw that conclusion. And I would cite that as, before the war began, the blowback he was getting from the Israeli military for wanting to change the Constitution, change the court. And so it's an internal domestic debate that seems to have no consequence. And whether he would change his position or not, it's hard to say, but it has not been helpful. That's why there's got to be. My major disagreement with Netanyahu is, what happens after? What happens after Gaza's over? What does it go back to? Do Israeli forces go back in? I've been talking to the Egyptians and been talking to the Saudis. I've been talking to the Jordanians. I've been talking to the Emiratis. The answer is, if that's the case, it can't work. There needs to be a transition to a two-state solution, and that's my biggest disagreement with Bibi Netanyahu. Well, glad you cleared that one up, Joe. Really appreciate it. Okay, and again, this interview goes on and on. At one point, he literally mixes up Russia and China. There's an actual editor's note in the middle of the piece. Quote, editor's note, Biden appeared to mean Xi here, not Putin. When he's discussing economics, absolute nonsense, gobbledygook, just mind trash. So he's asked about tariffs that he's placing on China. The interviewer says most economists say tariffs raise prices. And Biden says they do. The interviewer says cumulative inflation means that prices are up 18%, at least since you took office, and wage increases have not kept pace. And Biden says, since who took office? Since I took office? Well, yes, Joe. The interviewer says, yeah, cumulative inflation means prices are up nearly 20% since you took office, and wage increases have not kept pace. So Biden starts lying. Wage increases have exceeded what the cost of inflation, which you're talking about is the same prices that were pre-COVID prices. Pre-COVID prices are not the same as whether or not they. You have corporate America ripping off the public now. You have everything from shrinkflation to what's going on in terms of the way in which they're artificially moving significantly to increase their profits. That is a direct quote. In which they're artificially moving significantly to increase their profits. That's not the same as inflation. That's price gouging. And then the interviewer tries to clarify, Mr. President, won't your newly announced tariffs raise the prices on American consumers? And he says, no, because here's the deal. There's a difference. I made it clear to Putin from the very beginning that we're not engaging in. For example, Trump wants a 10% tariff on everything. That will raise the price of everything in America. Again, do you feel quieted by all of this? Do you feel as though the country is in the best of hands? There's more on this in just a moment. First, if you're struggling with collections, or medical bills, credit cards, personal loans, you need to check out PDS Debt. PDS Debt is an innovative one-stop shop to guide you on your journey to freedom from debt. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to becoming debt-free, which is why PDS Debt offers multiple programs and solutions tailored to your specific needs, budget, and future financial goals. Whether you're going through a serious hardship or you just can't seem to keep up with those high-interest credit cards, PDS Debt will craft a custom solution to give you instant relief and start saving you cash. If you're making payments every month on that debt, your balances aren't going down, the program's for you. PDS Debt provides options that consolidate your debts into one low monthly payment. Not only does PDS Debt have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, you'll save thousands in interest and fees and pay off your debt in a fraction of the time. PDS Debt cares about helping you get out of debt. Check out all their reviews. See how many people mention PDS Debt employees by name. It's incredible. Right now, PDS Debt is offering my listeners a free debt analysis. It only takes 30 seconds. Head on over to pdsdebt.com/Ben. Get your free debt assessment today. That's pdsdebt.com/Ben today. That's pdsdebt.com/Ben. So he was, in fact, asked about his age. Here was his answer. So the interviewer asked, quote, you are 81 years old and would be 86 by the time you left office. Large majorities of Americans, including in the Democratic Party, tell pollsters they think you're too old to lead. Could you really do this job as an 85-year-old man? And here's Joe Biden, quote,
I can do it better than anybody you know. You're looking at me. I can take you too.
He's literally threatening to fight the interviewer. Now, let's be clear about this. Joe Biden could not successfully fight a day-old head of cabbage. Not only would it disrupt his digestive system, leading to more cleanup on aisle 5 from his night nurse, but he literally physically could not fight an inanimate object. He routinely loses to them, from teleprompters to staircases. But he's threatening to fight people. He also mixes up Taiwan and South Korea. He goes on to insult Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary. he then finally suggests at the very end that if he loses, it's because China intervened in the election. He suggests, quote, everybody, all the bad guys are rooting for Trump, man. Not a joke. Think about it. Think about it. Well, I mean, we're all thinking about it, Joe, and it turns out that no one is quieted by your presidency. No one thinks you are doing a good job. Joe Biden's horrific presidency has led to widespread discontent in a nation he said he would unify. Everyone is feeling, by the polling data, very nervous about the economy. Everybody is paying too much at the pump. Everybody is paying too much at the grocery store. Everybody is paying too much at restaurants. Everybody is paying too much for rent. The social fabric is being completely destroyed by a president who believes that equity needs to be the keystone of all of his executive policies. And on foreign policy, China has been on the march. Russia literally marched into Ukraine, leading to an extraordinarily bloody war that has now lasted 2 full years. Israel was attacked by, and Joe Biden's first move after saying a few requisite words of comfort for the Israelis was to immediately swivel and attempt to stop the Israelis from doing what they must do in order to ensure their own security, instead pressuring them to make concessions to terrorist groups. This is the guy that Democrats believe needs to be president of the United States. I've been saying since the beginning of this election cycle, if this election is a referendum on Donald Trump, he's got a problem. If this election is a referendum on the incumbent, on Joe Biden cannot win. He is not a good president. End of story. And unlike Barack Obama, who was able to overcome his wild and terrible political incompetence in office by the fact that he was an amazing campaigner, that he was a community organizer, but not very good at, pulling the levers of government in effective ways, that he quite alienated all of the legislators that he needed in order to do things and took radical positions. Barack Obama was a once-in-a-generation political talent. Bill Clinton, for his part, was both incredibly politically talented and also a really good campaigner. Joe Biden is neither of these things. He is horrible at both. He makes terrible policy, and he can't even speak English anymore. Joe Biden, if he is not in the early stages to mid stages of senility, I don't think anybody knows what they're looking at. Okay, so Joe Biden is now trying to fill back in his policy failures with late-breaking executive orders. So yesterday, he announced that he was going to issue an executive order to curb illegal immigration. Here he was announcing this executive order, triumphantly sharing that he was now going to control the border, which is amazing because we have heard from him for years at this point. There was literally nothing he could do about the border. But now he's going to do something about the border, and we're supposed to trust that he actually believes that he's going to do something about the border. Do you trust him? Do you? After somewhere between 7 and 10 million illegal immigrants have entered the country, do you believe that Joe Biden really wants to close the border now?
Today, I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. Migrants will be restricted from receiving asylum at our southern border unless they seek it after entering through an established lawful process. This action will help us gain control of our border, restore order into the process. This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage.
What exactly is that level? According to Politico, the action and accompanying rule from the Biden administration allows the president to suspend asylum claims between ports of entry. Not at ports of entry, so you can still arrive at a port of entry, claim asylum, he'll still process you and let you into the interior. But he will only suspend asylum claims between ports of entry when there is an average of 2,500 crossings a day over a 7-day period. So again, I may not be a mathematician. However, I can do some basic math. That means that he will only suspend entry, asking for asylum, between ports of entry, not at the ports of entry, between, when the annualized rate of illegal immigration is almost 1 million illegal immigrants. Because 2,500 times 365 is 912,500. That threshold is when he starts to get a little upset. Now, the media are trying to play this as though he's actually trying to get the border under control. Quote, the announcement, this is Politico, represents an aggressive attempt by Biden to bolster his standing on the border in advance of the November election. Biden is expected to use a speech on Tuesday to highlight his unilateral efforts to resolve the crisis. He said, today, I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can to address the border. Now, realistically, he could have just reinstalled Remain in Mexico, which was the Trump-era border policy. He could, today, change the interpretation of asylum law so that instead of you simply arriving at the border and shouting, I fear to go back to my home country, Instead, you would actually have to make a serious evidentiary showing that there is a reason why you specifically fear to go back to your home country. Not because your home country is crap. Turns out most countries on planet Earth kind of crappy. You'd actually have to show why you specifically require asylum. Like you're a political victim of the current regime, for example. So Biden announced on Tuesday that he's also expected to face legal challenges, which is his way of just throwing something out there that gets struck down, and then he can claim that he tried to do what he can. But the truth is he's not even trying. So Bill Malugin, who's been doing excellent reporting for Fox News on the border, he tweeted out, quote, "In no way can Biden's executive order be described as shutting down the border. It bans asylum to some illegal crossers, with some exceptions. It does not stop or slow the up to 1,500 migrants per day released into the United States via CBP One app at ports of entry, and does not stop or slow the up to 30,000 migrants per month flying directly into the United States and being released into the country via Biden's controversial mass parole program for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans. Unaccompanied children and minors are exempt from the order, which leads to concerns about child trafficking. One of the things that a lot of these cartels do is they arrive on the border and they drop off kids. And then those kids have an adult pick them up on the other side of the border, but there's no real way to check who the adults are who are picking up the kids on the other side of the border, which is extraordinarily dangerous and dicey. Get to more on this in just a moment. First, my days are really full. Got the show, the company, being a dad, a lot going on. If I don't get a good night's sleep, my day sucks. That is why I rely on my Helix mattress. Helix harnesses years of mattress expertise to offer that truly elevated sleep experience. The Helix Elite Collection includes 6 different mattress models, each tailored for specific sleep positions and firmness preferences. If you're nervous about buying a mattress online, you don't have to be. Helix has a sleep quiz that matches your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress. Because why would you buy a mattress made for somebody else? I took that Helix quiz. I was matched with a firm but breathable mattress. I love it. My wife loves it. We are big Helix fans at the Shapiro house. In fact, when we had our family from out of town stay at the house recently, they asked where they could get a mattress like the one in the guest room. We told them they are proud owners of a Helix sleep mattress. Helix has a 10-year warranty. You get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it, but I'm not sure that's ever happened before. Helix is offering up to 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for my listeners. Just head on over to helixsleep.com/Ben. It's their best offer yet. It's not going to last long. helixsleep.com/Ben. With Helix, better sleep starts right now. Also, says Bill Malugin, asylum has already been banned for most migrants who cross illegally since the end of Title 42 last year. That hasn't stopped them from coming. Highest numbers in recorded history, end of 2023. The order may speed up removals to countries we can deport easily to, like Mexico or the Northern Triangle countries, but there's been no explanation as to how the administration will be able to begin mass removal of migrants coming from another hemisphere with governments that don't cooperate with the United States. Meanwhile, Allie Bradley, who's a network correspondent for News Nation, tweeted in an internal memo to ICE, the ERO Executive Associate Director says that CBP and ERO will not question illegal immigrants who cross the southern border and are processed for expedited removal while the limitation is in effect regarding their fear of return. Quote, if a non-citizen subject to the presidential proclamation is processed for expedited removal and manifests fear or an intention to apply for asylum or related protection while detained in ICE custody, the non-citizen must be referred to USCIS. Well, that's precisely the opposite of what Biden is saying publicly. That means that if you are processed for expedited removal and you say the magic words, I fear to go back to my home country, you are then removed from the procedures for expedited removal, and you are instead placed with USCIS for processing. In other words, Joe Biden is pretending. This is all pretend because he thinks you're a dum-dum. He thinks the American public is filled with dum-dums. And why wouldn't he think that? Somehow they elected him last time. President Trump, for his part, he came out and blasted Joe Biden's border incompetence. Here's what he had to say.
Millions of people have poured into our country, and now, after nearly 4 years of his failed, weak leadership, pathetic leadership, crooked Joe Biden is pretending to finally do something about the border. But in fact, it's all about show because he knows we have a debate coming up in 3 weeks. The truth is that Joe Biden's executive order won't stop the invasion. It's weak and it's pathetic. It will actually make the invasion worse. Millions of people a year will continue to pour across our border and be released into our country.
By the way, everyone knows this, including the people coming across the border who have been caught countless times on tape, specifically thanking Joe Biden for loosening border restrictions. But again, it's not just on our southern border. It's not just with regard to our economy. It's also on foreign policy where we have a problem. Joe Biden is continuing to pressure Israel to accept a deal that supposedly Israel proposed. Again, this is like the stupidest thing. It's unbelievably stupid. Basically, Joe Biden is attempting a tactic where he takes a proposal that is vague And then he tries to spin it up into Israel surrendering to and then asks to accept the surrender. Israel, for its part, is like, no, we're not. That's not a deal that we want. But Joe Biden is going to continue to try and walk this zombie proposal through the process. According to the Times of Israel, Joe Biden told Qatari Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani on Monday that Israel was prepared to advance the hostage deal proposal it made last week and urged Doha to pressure to accept the offer. Biden, quote, confirmed Israel's readiness to move forward with the terms that have now been offered and urged the Emir to use all appropriate measures to secure acceptance of the deal. But of course, that's ridiculous because Israel has already come out and said, we will not accept a deal that leaves in control of the Gaza Strip, and we are not going to simply abandon the Gaza Strip to the tender mercies of. Again, the Israeli government not only did not make this proposal, Joe Biden is lying about the proposal they did make. Well, it turns out that when the proposal was conveyed to, it did not include a provision allowing to continue to exist or ending the war permanently. So immediately came out and rejected the deal, which of course they were going to do. This is all very reminiscent of the sweetheart deal that got cut on behalf of Hunter Biden by the DOJ, where basically the prosecutors in defense had agreed covertly that they wouldn't say the quiet part out loud, that they were getting rid of all the Hunter Biden tax cases with the gun charge case, but they kind of were. And then a judge called them on it and was like, guys, what do you mean by this? And when that was exposed, the entire deal fell apart. That's what's happening right now. Joe Biden is attempting to push forward a deal that ignores the key component. Will get to survive and run the Gaza Strip. Israel says no, says yes, so there's no deal. But Joe Biden is trying to cram the perspective down on Israel. And Israel's like, no. So that got conveyed to, and now senior official Osama Hamda clarified a short time ago in an official press conference on behalf of, quote, we informed the mediators we could not agree to a deal that would not guarantee a permanent ceasefire and a full withdrawal from the Gaza Strip alongside a serious prisoner deal. In other words, they are not going to simply sign a prisoner deal unless Israel effectively surrenders the Gaza Strip back to, which would be the stupidest military move in human history. Meanwhile, count on the French to bend over on behalf of the world's worst human beings. They have a long history of doing this, of course. On Tuesday, French President Emmanuel Macron called for an end to the war in Gaza, but he didn't condition that ceasefire on the release of captives at all. Absolute absurdity on every level. Meanwhile, at least the House of Representatives, where Republicans still run the place, passed a bill to sanction the International Criminal Court for its attempt to charge the Israeli prime minister with war crimes. The legislation passed 247 to 155 with 42 Democrats joining the Republicans to pass the bill despite opposition from the White House. So again, absolute incompetence on the foreign front. All of this makes a hostage deal significantly less likely because believes that the longer they hold out, the more pressure that Biden will bring on the Israeli government. It's also more likely to lead to a conflagration in the north because Hezbollah believes that the harder they push in the north, the more Biden will pressure Israel not to do anything. So again, the situation across the world just gets worse. We'll get to more on this in just 1 second. First, finding that perfect sleep aid can feel like uncovering a hidden treasure. Whether you're struggling with occasional insomnia or battling chronic sleep disturbances, the right sleep aid can make all the difference in the world. Beam's Dream Powder is an all-natural nighttime drink blend that's improved 15 million nights of sleep. Producer Savvy is apparently asleep right now in the control room because she didn't take it last night. But you love Beam Dream Powder, don't you, Jess?
I love my Beam Dream Ben. I just mix it in with a little warm milk before bed every single night, and then I wake up feeling like $1,000,000 refreshed in the morning, so I'm not looking like Savannah over here.
Yeah, Savannah. Beam Dream Powder contains that powerful all-natural blend of reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. Again, our producers love it, and if they forget about it, it has effects the next day. Today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, their science-backed healthy nighttime for sleep with no added sugar. Better sleep has never tasted better. Just mix Beam Dream into hot water or milk, stir or froth, and enjoy before bedtime. Don't waste another night battling the bedtime blues. Go and get Beam today. Your weary self will thank you. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, take advantage of 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Ben and use code Ben at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Ben with my promo code Ben for up to 40% off your order. Meanwhile, the Hunter Biden trial began yesterday, and it had a couple of bombshells in it. Bombshell number one, I got to say, the Biden family, these are what a bunch of virtuous, wonderful people. What a bunch of truly deliciously virtuous people. Solid folks. According to Breitbart, Hallie Biden, the ex of Hunter Biden and widow of his brother, will testify about using crack with Hunter, according to prosecutor Derek Hines. Hallie, of course, dated Hunter in 2018 and found his Colt Cobra 38 handgun in his truck outside her home. So, not trusting him because he was a drug addict, she dumped the gun in a nearby grocery store trash bin. Hunter, of course, lied on his federal forms. That's what this trial is about. Again, the prosecution is going to call several witnesses, apparently, including Hallie, to testify that apparently Hunter helped get her addicted to crack. What a joy he is. The smartest person Joe Biden knows. What a wonderful human being. So glad Joe Biden was keeping classified documents at his home in Wilmington where Hunter was staying. No risk there, probably. Meanwhile, in the most delicious turn of the trial so far, the Hunter Biden gun trial jurors were shown the infamous laptop reported by the New York Post. You remember the laptop from hell? This would be Hunter Biden's laptop that drug-addled idiot left at a computer repair shop. And you will remember that there were hundreds of intelligence officials who came out and said it was Russian disinformation. It was a piece of agitprop coming from Vladimir Putin. And you'll remember that the Biden campaign came out and echoed that. They knew full well it was real. After all, Joe happens to be Hunter's father, as we have been reminded many, many times. And yet, Joe went out there and lied about it. The Democratic Party went out there and lied about it. And then the Biden campaign and the FBI attempted to suppress the dissemination of that particular story with the Russian disinformation nonsense by going to social media and pretending that it was Russian disinformation. Well, yesterday in court, the laptop was presented as a piece of evidence by the prosecution, which means the government knows full well the laptop is real. According to the New York Post, the pivotal moment unfolded after prosecutor Derek Hines brought out a plastic-wrapped laptop, walked it across the courtroom, and presented it to his first witness, FBI Special Agent Erica Jensen. Jensen took the MacBook Pro 13 and verified that it had in fact belonged to President Biden's son. Now, again, Joe Biden had loaded all of his goodies on there, including pictures of prostitutes and him doing crack, stuff that you'd really want like a good record of. I'm amazed at how many people do the crime on the tape. It really is an incredible thing. But it only took a few years for them to admit that the Hunter Biden laptop was real. I can't imagine why we've blown out all of our institutional trust after the intelligence community came out and suggested it was all fake and shut down the story a month out from the election of 2020. In just 1 second, we'll get to Merrick Garland, another member of the Injustice Squad for Joe Biden, who appeared before Congress yesterday. First, did you join the legal profession only to take a job that is draining and meaningless? Been there, folks. Would you like to work for a legal department that doesn't suck the soul right out of your body like a Dementor? Well, you are in luck. The Daily Wire legal department, that is the same legal team that sued the Biden administration over its vax mandate and won, is seeking 4 great legal minds: a corporate attorney, an entertainment attorney, a director of litigation, and a contracts manager. So what exactly are you waiting for? This is your big opportunity. Do you want to join the legal team that supports the Daily Wire's growing businesses, like Jeremy's Razors, Bentkey, and the Daily Wire Plus, and that is currently suing the State Department to protect the freedom of speech and freedom of the press? Apply right now at dailywire.com/careers. You might find yourself on the front lines of the culture war doing heavy work. Apply right now at dailywire.com/careers. Meanwhile, Merrick Garland, the world's second worst attorney general, I still place Eric Holder at the top of the list, he appeared in front of Congress where he was browbeaten about his horrible tenure as Attorney General of the United States. He, of course, attempted to defend himself. He said he will not be intimidated. He's just pursuing justice. Now, you can name off the top of your head half a dozen times when Merrick Garland absolutely did not pursue justice. Whether it is his attempt to cut a sweetheart deal with Hunter Biden, or whether it's his latest attempts, for example, to hide the tape of his own DOJ interviewing our no longer sentient vegetable president of the United States. But he's out there saying that he's doing the Lord's work. This is a man who stands for justice. Merrick Garland. Here we go.
These repeated attacks on the Justice Department are unprecedented and they are unfounded. These attacks have not and they will not influence our decision-making. I view contempt as a serious matter, but I will not jeopardize the ability of our prosecutors and agents to do their jobs effectively in future investigations. I will not be intimidated, and the Justice Department will not be intimidated. We will continue to do our jobs free from political influence, and we will not back down from defending democracy.
Merrick Garland doing the Al Pacino routine from And Justice for All. You're out of order. This entire court is out of order. Ah! No one believes you, dude. No one believes you. The Department of Justice has been plagued by corruption since at least the Clinton administration, if you go all the way back to Janet Reno, certainly was plagued by corruption during the Obama administration, where the Civil Rights Department of the Justice Department went out of its way to do heavy political dirty work in favor of Barack Obama's political agenda, where Eric Holder literally declared himself the president's wingman. And I love it when Democrats are like, how dare you, sir, impugn the dignity of the Department of Justice. You literally did that nonstop while Donald Trump was president. You literally wouldn't stop doing it. You said that Bill Barr was corrupt. You said Jeff Sessions was corrupt, even though Jeff Sessions literally recused himself and allowed the Mueller investigation to go forward. I don't believe you. I don't believe you, Merrick Garland. All of these supposed institutionalists who have spent the last 3 years destroying these institutions and their credibility, going out there and being like, but why don't you respect the institutions? Respect them. Respect them right now, or you're destroying our democracy, TM. Capital O, capital D, our democracy. I don't believe you. You're hypocrites and you're liars. But this is the shtick. So here's Merrick Garland saying, democracy can't continue if you continue to attack the DOJ. Weird. I feel like democracy, in fact, might involve attacking the DOJ sometimes. It feels like democracy might involve, say, criticism of executive branch agencies that involve unelected bureaucrats doing the dirty work of enforcing the political agenda of the president of the United States. That might be democracy a little bit. In fact, it might be democracy when the House of Representatives, an elected branch, holds to account the Attorney General, who's never been elected by anybody. But again, this is all clownish crap about how anybody who opposes the Biden administration is the true tyrant. True democracy is when you just give all authority to Joe Biden and never ask any questions again. That's of course what democracy looks like.
We intend to aggressively investigate and prosecute threats against our public officials, including members of Congress, of which the numbers have actually exploded in the past couple of years. Our democracy cannot continue if the people who make the democracy run are afraid, if they make their decisions based on fear of being threatened or of being assaulted. No democracy can survive under those circumstances, and we will do everything we can in our power to investigate, deter, and prosecute anyone who makes threats against public servants.
2 words, Derek Chauvin. Seriously, that dude is in jail because of public intimidation, including by the current president of the United States and his vice president. All these people pretending that the justice system is working absolutely apolitically. Merrick Garland, what a joke. So Merrick Garland was asked about whether there had been any communications between the DOJ and, say, local prosecutors in Atlanta or Manhattan. Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation about the political prosecution of Donald Trump in New York, Alvin Bragg bringing a completely specious charge that was predicated upon a federal charge over which he has no jurisdiction, or Letitia James in New York, or Fannie Willis in Atlanta, who, when she's not stooping the other prosecutors who she hired specifically for the purpose, apparently, is bringing specious RICO charges. So the question was asked by Congressman Matt Gaetz, do you guys have any communications with these local prosecutors? And Garland's like, how dare you, sir? How dare you?
Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fannie Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident.
Matt Gaetz is correct here. He is absolutely correct. If the DOJ wants to show no coordination, they could say there are no documents. There have been no such communications. They're not saying that. Like, you can lodge that request. I guarantee you that Merrick Garland knows whether there are documents or not. And this is all, it's also tiresome and it's also childish. Merrick Garland is a political hack. He's been a political hack since the day he became Attorney General of the United States. Thank God Mitch McConnell stopped him from being on the Supreme Court of the United States to join his fellow left-wing hacks like Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor. Merrick Garland was then asked about whether there was evidence tampering in the Trump case, because there were some photos, for example, that came from Mar-a-Lago of the FBI having spread out the evidence and put top secret folders down on the floor to make it look as though the documents said right on them in giant letters, top secret. Here was Jim Jordan asking Merrick Garland about this.
He was the best pick for the most high-profile investigation ever?
He was independent. He was nonpartisan. He had never held a political office. He was never appointed in a political office.
Was he your first choice?
He had a long career as a career
Was he your
prosecutor.
first choice?
I'm not going to go into the questions.
Did you know him before you picked him?
I did not.
You never worked with him?
I did not.
Did you meet with him prior to announcing his selection and tell him what was going on?
Of course I did.
What happened in that meeting?
I met with him. I asked him if he would be willing to do this. We talked about my understandings of the role of this office, which are on the public record. That's all.
Did he ask for the job?
This is not a job I don't think anybody asks for. I'm sorry.
No, but that's not the question I asked you. I said, did Jack Smith ask for the job?
He did not ask me for the job, no.
Okay. Then Garland went on to suggest that he's never listened to this famous tape now of Joe Biden and special counsel Robert Hur. So you'll recall, Robert Hur was the prosecutor who looked into Joe Biden's mishandling of classified information. You'll also remember that the entire transcript of that interview was released. And that transcript is just as bad as the Time magazine transcript that I read you a little bit earlier. It's filled with gobbledygook and nonsense, absolute incoherence from a babbling buffoon. And so everybody rightly was like, can we hear the tape? Especially because Robert Hur had let the president of the United States off without charges by effectively declaring that he was unfit to face trial, that he would have been acquitted on the basis that he is, in fact, an elderly buffoon no longer in control of his faculties or his bowels. And so people are like, well, can we listen to the tape? And Merrick Garland was like, no, you can't listen to that tape. How dare you even ask for that tape? So according to Garland, he has never listened to that audio at all. Here he was being asked about it.
Have you listened to the audio recording?
I have not, because there's no reason for me to listen to it in order to make the determinations that I had to make. We had the special counsel describe in detail his explanations for his determinations.
So let me, I don't understand how you can kind of sit before the congressional committee and kind of arbitrate what's indistinguishable from the transcripts if you're not even sure what's on the tapes themselves.
I'm not doing it on my own. I have...
so you're saying other people have listened to it within the department?
Within the department, and the special counsel has listened to it, and the special counsel had every interest in ensuring that the transcript that he produced in order to do his investigation would be accurate.
Okay, well, you haven't listened to the tape, so why don't you release it, though? That's the question. Why can't we hear any of it?
We have made clear that we will not provide audio recordings from which the transcripts that you already have were created. Releasing the audio would chill cooperation with the department in future investigations, and it could influence witnesses' answers if they thought the audio of their law enforcement interviews would be broadcast to Congress and the public.
It could influence their answers? What if you released the transcript? Couldn't that influence their answers? This is all such hackish garbage. This goes to the key problem for the Biden campaign. Joe Biden and his friends have undermined American institutions in absolutely critical ways. They've undermined American allies in absolutely critical ways. They are very bad, in other words, at the president thing. And that is why they say that a convicted felon, 34-time convicted felon, is currently running up on Joe Biden, is currently running ahead of Joe Biden. That is not a coincidence. That is a basic reality. And it is because Joe Biden is horrible at this. There's more on this in a moment. First, I know what it's like to start and run a business. Saving time is the biggest key there is. This is why I'm excited to introduce you to Ramp. If you're a finance professional looking for a better way to maximize productivity and cut that wasteful spending, Ramp could be for you. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software designed to help you save time and put money back in your pocket. With Ramp, you can issue cards to every employee with limits and restrictions. You can also stop wasting time at the end of every month by automating those expense reports. Ramp's accounting software automatically collects receipts and categorizes your expenses in real time, so you're not going to have to do that. You'll never have to chase down a receipt again. Your employees will no longer spend hours submitting expense reports. The time you'll save each month on employee expenses will allow you to close your books 8 times faster. Ramp is super easy to use. Get started in less than 15 minutes, whether you have 5 employees or 5,000. Get $250 when you join Ramp. Just go to ramp.com/Shapiro. That's spelled RAMP.com/Shapiro. Again, that's ramp.com/Shapiro. Cards issued by Sutton Bank and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions do apply. Ramp.com/Shapiro to get started. By the way, when I say that Joe Biden is slipping, let me make clear, I'm not the only one saying this. I love when there are news stories that confirm the most obvious things in the world. And there's a study, and it's like, men find women who are hot, sexually attractive. It's like, study says. Like, I didn't need a study for that. Like, I knew that. Well, here's another one of those. You ready? Here we go. Behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping. Behind closed doors. How about like in front of open doors? How about like everywhere? How about literally slipping and falling? That's the Wall Street Journal, by the way. It's their top headline today. Quote, when President Biden met with congressional leaders in the West Wing in January to negotiate a Ukraine funding deal, he spoke so softly at times, some participants struggled to hear him, according to 5 people familiar with the meeting. He read from notes to make obvious points, paused for extended periods, and sometimes closed his eyes for so long some in the room wondered whether he had tuned out. In a February one-on-one chat in the Oval Office with House Speaker Mike Johnson, the president said a recent policy change by his administration that jeopardizes some big energy projects was just a study, according to 6 people told at the time about what Johnson said had happened. Johnson worried the president's memory had slipped about the details of his own policy. Last year, when Biden was negotiating with House Republicans to lift the debt ceiling, his demeanor and command of the details seemed to shift from one day to the next, according to then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and 2 others familiar with the talks. On some days, he had loose and spontaneous exchanges with Republicans. On others, he mumbled and appeared to rely on notes. I used to meet with him when he was VP. I'd go to his house, McCarthy said. He's not the same person. Some who have worked with him, including Democrats and some who have known him from back to his time as VP, described a president who appears slower now. Someone who has both good moments and bad ones. What are we describing, grandma here? He's the president of the United States running for re-election. They're like, well, grandma has some good moments. Every so often, she recognizes her grandchildren. Other times, she shouts at the Jamaican lady who works with her and says racist things. Like, what are we talking about here? He's the president of the United States in charge of the world's most powerful military. And he can't hold it together for more than 10 minutes at a time without being drugged up the wazoo. Honest to God, whatever cocktail they gave him before the State of the Union, if they gave it to me, my head would explode. It's insane. For much of his career, Biden enjoyed a reputation on Capitol Hill for being a master negotiator of legislative deals. No, he didn't. Over the past year, though, with Republicans in control of the House, that reputation has diminished. White House spokesman Andrew Bates says this is false. Quote, congressional Republicans, foreign leaders, and nonpartisan national security experts have made clear in their own words, President Biden is a savvy, effective leader who has a deep record of legislative accomplishment. Now in 2024, House Republicans are making false claims as a political tactic that flatly contradict previous statements made by themselves and their colleagues. While the Wall Street Journal talked with more than 45 people over several months, including both Republicans and Democrats, most of those who said Biden performed poorly were Republicans, but some Democrats said he showed his age in several of the exchanges. Again, this notion that this guy is capable of running the country, he's horrible ideologically. Combine the ideological horror of this presidency with the fact that the president of the United States is no longer with us, and what you end up with is a president who is cruising for a bruising in his reelect fight. Again, all Donald Trump has to do, when they get to that debate, Donald Trump needs to be quiet. He needs to be quiet. He needs to let Joe Biden talk. Just let him keep talking. And if Joe Biden drifts off and he says, anyway, Trump at that point should say, Joe, I know we all want to hear what you're saying. Keep going. He needs to say, Joe, you haven't filled your time yet, Joe. I don't want to take time away from you. Go for it, Joe. Like, really, I don't want to cut you off. Really, go for it. We'll see how that plays for Joe Biden. Already coming up, Ibram X. Kendi. You remember him. He's how to be an anti-racist guy. Well, it turns out his entire career is falling apart because the grift is over. If you're not a member, become a member, use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.